Good morning, guys. Welcome to week 7, Corona break. Hopefully, everybody's out there being healthy and happy. Talked a lot to you this week. Seems like people are doing pretty well, except for the boredom. This week, we are talking about setting. Um, you guys all know what setting is for the most part. I think you've been doing it since about 6th grade, probably about 3rd grade, actually. But the definition that I am looking at here is the time and place of a story. Now, the time is the part of it that people forget a lot. The setting isn't just the physical location; it's also when it takes place. And by time, it could be something very acute and pointed, like the time of the day, or it could be something like this season is taking place, which is kind of a bigger idea, or a year, or even within a historical period. So it could take place at between 11 and 12 on a Saturday. It could take place just in the fall. It could take place in 2020 or 2070 or 1969. A lot of different stuff is going to happen based on the year when it takes place. It could also be in the historical period. It could be a Civil War story, or it could be a French Revolution story. So, depending on when the story takes place, it could be any of these from very non-specific to very specific. Um, where's the place of a story? In kind of the same way as the time, it can be bigger or more specific. So it could take in a home. Like this could all take place in one room in a dark basement. It could be in a town, in an urban area. Urban is just a word that means like heavily city. So it could be a town, a city. It could take place in the woods. Any of these things could happen. Um, it could take place in a country. This could just be a story that takes place in the U.S. It could be a story that takes place in Germany. It could be a story that takes place in the Czech Republic. It could be any of these places. Um, Also, can you have more than one setting in your book? Absolutely can. Lots of books have multiple settings. Some books have 3 or 4, and some have a whole bunch of different ones that they switch all over the place. If you're reading a book with time travel in it, it could have multiple different times, multiple different places and times. So setting can change a lot in your book. What I want you to think about specifically as you read today and every day, really, um, is how does that setting affect your story? Um, there's an example here. Some stories are set in particular time periods. So if your story is set in Nazi Germany, the Middle Ages, like today with computer access and more importantly, probably cell phones, it could be a 1960s hippie area, etc. So whenever your story is set, it's going to affect both the plot, the characters in it, sort of, it might even affect the theme. So setting is very important. Um, Specifically, geographical features are necessary in some stories. Geographical features are just things like features of the land. So it could be like a mountain or a lake or a cornfield, right? Characters might need to cross a river, traverse mountains, be chased through a cornfield, or slog through swamps, etc. Um, so those geographical features are necessary. So if you have um, if you need a lake in your story, then it can't take place in the desert, obviously, right? If you need to be in the mountains, then it can't take place on the plains. So a lot of times your story will dictate where the setting is, but also the setting can sometimes lead to developments in the story. All right. So an example, Gate A has a very specific setting. This is a book about immigration. So the place is an airport at a certain gate, A4. It's in the U.S. The time for this story is modern day. It's after September 11th sometime, and the whole book takes place in about a 3 hour period. Um, like I said, that's a specific book. So today and every day as you read, think about the place and time of your book, but more importantly, how that place and time affects the characters and the events of the story. Um, so if we take, for example, like a book that a lot of people know is Harry Potter, or a story as Harry Potter that people know. Harry Potter's a very different book if it doesn't take place at Hogwarts, right? If they come to Harry in the Muggle world and tell him about magic, um, it's a whole different thing than going to that magical school and the wonder that he has to go through and the figuring everything out. And everybody knows who he is, but he doesn't know who they are. That whole aspect of the story is gone if he doesn't go away to Hogwarts, right? You can tell the story as in like tutors could come to the real world and teach him how to be a wizard, but it changes the whole story, right? If you think about Of Mice and Men, which you all read last year, if that takes place not in a place where there are ranches, so if that took place in a city, you could still tell the story, but the whole feel of it would be different, right? Because they don't have these wide open spaces. They wouldn't have the bunkhouses where people could all get together and they could have those conversations that kind of lead to the theme. You could still have George and Lenny wandering around in a city like Chicago, but it would be a very different story, right? There would be less room for the plot devices you need. There'd be more of a chance where how is Lenny going to be alone with a woman for that amount of time? Stuff like that. He's not going to find a mouse probably they can play with in the city. So that changes a lot of how the story is, right? It's a very specific place that story takes place. Okay, so as you read, think about the setting. Let's take a look real quickly at your assignment for today. This is what it looks like. I put some a little confused with the last one, so I put an example with this one. But you need 3 quotes from your book. So remember, quotes are not necessarily just something somebody says in your book. When I say quote, I'm just talking about using exact examples of the words from your book. So it doesn't have to be something somebody said. Anytime you're using the exact words from your book at any place, it's called a quote. So it's not necessarily something a character said. It's just something from your book, specifically word for word. Okay, so you need 3 quotes that talk about the setting in some way. And remember, that could be just something from describing a sunset. It could be describing the exact city it takes place. Any of that could happen. And then you're going to write a paragraph, okay? So for your topic sentence here, you are going to give the basics, like the time and place, introduce your setting, tell me the title of your book. So just tell me an overview of where this takes place, okay? Now you write some important details here in the next 3 sentences here. You need some times mentioned in your book, place, sound, smell, any of that stuff. Make sure you put the author's name at the end of your sentence. So we didn't have time in school to really go over this too much. We're going to go over it at the end of this unit. But I'm asking for 4 sentences, anywhere really 3 or 4 is fine. And what you need to do is at the end, you're going to put your author's name in parentheses. That doesn't mean you're citing it like a quote, but you're citing it like because you're summarizing some of his work, okay? All right, your closing here, you're going to wrap up your argument by giving a simple closing sentence. That's going to kind of wrap everything up, just 1 sentence. So you need 1 sentence up here, 3 or 4 in the middle, and then 1 at the end. So we're looking for 5 or 6 sentences. Here's an example. This is from Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which was a play that J.K. Rowling wrote at the end of Harry Potter. So here are 3 examples. A busy, crowded station full of people trying to go nowhere. Amongst the hustle bustle, 2 large cages rattle on top of 2 laden trolleys. Okay, and then that's from page 7, so I put a page 7 in the period after it. So all you need is the page number. Because you're only using 1 book, you don't have to put an author's name or anything. Just the page number it comes from in parentheses after it like that. Okay? My topic sentence is the setting for J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Cursed Child changes time and place often. So my sentence is just saying that it takes place in lots of different places. And here are my sentences. In the beginning, much of the story takes place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Hogwarts looks like a fortress and is filled with different rooms and hallways. So that sentence is me just telling you, or these 2 sentences, I'm describing the first setting, which is Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and then I'm telling you a little bit what it looks like. But all this changes when Albus and his friend Scorpius begin time traveling. Through their adventures, the 2 travel back to quiet neighborhoods in the 1980s, Hogwarts in the 1990s, and a dark, mysterious forest during the Triwizard Tournament. Okay, so that tells you a little bit about what the different settings are. Nothing fancy, guys. This isn't real hard. I just want to make sure you understand how the setting affects what's going on. Last thing, the story keeps you guessing by continuously changing the setting. That's just, again, pointing back up a little bit to how it changes place often in the first sentence. All right, so you can always remember email me if you have questions or text me. I'm going to have this little live thing again at 10 or 10:30, depending on what class you're in. So good luck. Have at you. And have a good week, guys.